Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing today? I hope you all are having a fantastic day today. Do you want to get into gaming, but a modded controller gives you the heebie jeebies because of all the interactable components or buttons? Do you just wish you had a controller with less buttons to learn from to make it a bit easier? Or do you have a Sega Genesis controller, but you just don't know how to use it? What are the buttons called? How do you press them? Or even how do you know what they do? If that's the case, keep watching. I'm going to give you the exclusive insider tips and tricks on how to use a Sega Genesis controller. At the end of this video, you will have the knowledge needed to confidently use a Sega Genesis controller to play any Genesis game. Sounds amazing. Let's get started then. This is the 3-button version of the Sega Genesis controller, notable by its 3 face buttons. This is also the first model of Genesis controller that was made. Pretty cool. Some kind of history right here. That's awesome. And so before we actually play the game, before we press the buttons, first we need to pick it up. And there are 2 goals for picking it up. One is to hold the controller so it's comfortable. And 2, you got to press all of this on the left side with your left thumb and this on the right side with your right thumb in a comfortable manner. You have to reach them comfortably. No strain, because if you start straining, it's not going to be fun. Okay. So I'm going to show you how I hold the controller. Feel free to do what I do. Feel free to modify it, or feel free to do something else on your own. I put pressure between the controller to hold it up. Not too much, not too little. My left thumb is in the middle of this thing. My right thumb is on the first or second button, sometimes in between the buttons, actually, depending on how I'm feeling that day. My index fingers are on the top, just, chilling like a villain. The other fingers are just kind of curled under. They don't really do much. They don't support the controller. They don't give any magical abilities. They just do none. They're just there. So they're just curled, just however your hands just naturally rest. Like everything else in the world, Sega Genesis controllers have their own terminology, and we need to learn that terminology. So we're going to go from left to right. I'm going to tell you what these are called. On the left side, we have the directional pad, or D-pad for short. The D-pad can be pressed in 8 directions. Up, right, down, left, and left up. On the right side, we have A, B, C, and start. Before we continue, I want to quickly mention the 6-button version that Sega made. Please forgive me. I know I don't have the first-party version. We're going to have to deal with the Super Pad by Performance. This 6-button version has the buttons we are now familiar with: the D-pad, start, A, B, and C. Additionally, this has 4 buttons we're new to: mode, X, Y, and Z. Feel free to use whatever controller you have. Whatever controller you have and whatever is the most comfortable. The vast majority of Sega Genesis games work with both controllers. There is a tiny amount of games that require either one or the other. So unless you're playing with that game, feel free to use whatever controller you have that you're comfortable with. Okay? Comfort is the key. I am going to be continuing this video with the 3-button version because that's the version I like. So how do you press these buttons? Well, just like from the terminology, we're going to go from left to right. On the left side, we have the D-pad. And there are 2 ways I like using the D-pad. One is if I need some more fluid movement, so cruising through the waters and Echo the Dolphin Tides of Time, or moving at the supersonic speed in Sonic 3D Blast. This movement is achieved by kind of like moving my joint almost. But I keep the middle of my thumb in the middle of the D-pad and I just move it around. If I don't need fluid movement, I need something more distinct, up, down, left, and right, I'll usually just move my thumb to where it needs to go. And that's it. Now, A, B, and C. Just put your thumb on B and just move your thumb left and right. That's usually how I think of just moving left and right. Another way to pitch is pivoting. Use around this area right here is where my thumb is pivoting. Just pivot on that and you're golden. Now, start. It's a little cheeky button. It's kind of out of the way, isn't it? There's two ways I like pressing it. One is by bringing my thumb to the start button. The other is by bringing the start button to my thumb. Let's go over both, shall we? Bringing thumb to the start button. I am actually lifting up my wrist. I'm lifting up my wrist to move my thumb. And the other way, to bring the start button to my thumb, you press down on the knuckle of your left thumb and push up with your index finger. It'll bring the Sega Genesis controller. Move it. And that brings the start button to your thumb. You notice they don't really have any names. So how do you know what these do? Well, I can kind of give you that answer. The D-pad and the start have well-defined functions that I can tell you, but A, B, and C are wildcards. Why are they wildcards? We will get to that in a moment. Let me go through the D-pad and start first, and then we'll get to A, B, and C, shall we? The D-pad has two well-defined functions. One is to move your controller on the screen, and the second function is to navigate a menu. The start button has three functions. Ooh. One is to actually start the game, which is why it's called the start button. Most games on the title screen will say press start. The second function is to pause or to freeze your game. This is used if you want to not turn off your Sega Genesis yet, but you want to walk away to eat or do something else. To do that, just press start and then walk away from the controller. When you are ready to start again, go ahead, pick up the controller, and we're going to invoke the third function of the start button, which is to unpause or unfreeze the game. Now, A, B, and C. Why are these wildcards? Well, each game has its own unique actions, and they're assigned to A, B, and C. So instead of labeling a button action, drive, or something and having many buttons, they decided to have three buttons, and just the game will know if you press A what to do. For example, in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, A is to make Sonic jump, or Knuckles jump, or whoever you're playing as. But in Phantasy Star 4, A opens the menu. You see, they're different. To further complicate matters, the same button will do different things in the same game, depending on where you are and what you're doing. For example, in Crusader of Senti, A will use your sword, will swing your sword. If you walk up to somebody and press the A button, you talk to them. So with A, B, and C being wildcards, is there a way to figure out what they do before you play the game? And the answer is yes, you can actually. Back in the day, games came with something called manuals. And a manual was a little booklet. I can get this open. A little booklet that spoke about the game or things about the game. So this has things like how to power up the Sega Genesis and a map and the story. But for our purposes, the controls. Walk is D-pad. Push is the D-pad. Sword is button A. Talk is button A. And pause command screen is the start button. And as we saw, button A just talk and the sword. Well, what if you don't have a manual? Either your game's too young to have one or you lost it, which is fine. Game FAQs. www.gamefaqs.com. Go to guides, type in your game, and I guarantee any guide will explain what the buttons do. But what if you don't want to do that? What if you just want to go as you learn? You can totally do that. Pop a game in your Sega Genesis, turn it on, and start pressing the buttons and see what they do. If you want to see a real-life example of that happening, go ahead and look at my Billy Bust-Up video. It is linked in the description below. I do that exact same thing. I don't know what the controls are, so I just have to learn them on the fly. We're done. Congratulations. You now know enough to confidently use a Sega Genesis controller to play any Sega Genesis game. Congratulations. You should feel super proud of yourself for getting this far. What game are you going to play? Did I not talk about any problems, or did I not mention any solutions that you found that helped you? If so, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. Now, we're not done with our controller series because there are way more controllers to go through. So go ahead, stay tuned, because the next episode we are going to be going over the Super Nintendo Entertainment System controller, which has 5 additional buttons compared to the 3-button version of the Sega Genesis controller, and 2 of their buttons are on the top. With that out of the way, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Love you all, and I will see you all next time.